Well, hello everybody, and my name is Louise Edington. For those of you that don't know me, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a little bit, but I want to get my screen sharing and to share my presentation. So I'm going to get that going. So you should all be able to see the start of my presentation here. And some reason it started on the second slide. But this is going to be about Saturn. This is about a shamanic experience of Saturn, and I'll explain what that means as we go forward. I have a couple of videos to play for you, one very short one at the start, and then towards the end of the presentation, I'm actually going to take you all on a shamanic journey to Saturn. And this is kind of my way of learning about the energies in depth. And I'll talk more about that in the future too. But first, because I love Saturn, and you'll find out why very soon, I will be playing this video from NASA about the Cassini's mission. So let's watch this for a couple of minutes.
A lone explorer on a mission to reveal the grandeur of Saturn, its rings and moons. After 20 years in space, NASA's Cassini spacecraft is running out of fuel. And so, to protect moons of Saturn that could have conditions suitable for life, a spectacular end has been planned for this long-lived traveler from Earth.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Cassini spacecraft on a million-mile trek to Saturn. We have cleared the tower. Which program is in? What program is in?
In 2004, following a 7-year journey through the solar system, Cassini arrived at Saturn.
SY burn attitude of pointing position. Light up the rockets.
The spacecraft carried a passenger, the European Huygens probe, the first human-made object to land on a world in the distant outer solar system. For over a decade, Cassini has shared the wonders of Saturn and its family of icy moons, taking us to astounding worlds where methane rivers run to a methane sea, where jets of ice and gas are blasting material into space from a liquid water ocean that might harbor the ingredients for life. And Saturn, a giant world ruled by raging storms and delicate harmonies of gravity. Now, Cassini has one last daring assignment. Cassini's grand finale is a brand new adventure. 22 dives through the space between Saturn and its rings. As it repeatedly braves this unexplored region, Cassini seeks new insights about the origins of the rings and the nature of the planet's interior, closer to Saturn than ever before. On the final orbit, Cassini will plunge into Saturn, fighting to keep its antenna pointed at Earth as it transmits its farewell. In the skies of Saturn, the journey ends, as Cassini becomes part of the planet itself.
Okay, so that just sends chills through me. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, but before I do, I want you to know that Cassini was launched in 1997, which was the year of my Pluto square, and it was the year that I got married, that my dad died, and I became a mom for the first time. And I'm interested in numbers too. And it's been 20 years since Cassini launched. And did you know that 20 is the number of redemption? So I just found that really interesting. And it's my belief that that we should learn all that we can about the energies in the cosmos. So yes, I've had a lifelong love of astrology. I have. It started so young I can't remember. I have things diaries from when I was like 14, with things about sun signs written, with things carefully copied out, my own words about them. Then in 1989, on my first Saturn return, actually, so interesting that we're talking about Saturn today, a friend of mine had studied astrology, and she created my chart for me back when charts were hand calculated, before we had computer programs to do it. And I was just hooked because of what she told me about me that she could see in my chart. And she gave me some books. I learned to calculate charts myself by hand, using all those tools we used to have to learn. I don't know if I could do it now, though, to be quite honest. I'm sure I could. I'm sure I'd pick it back up again. And I just devoured books and practiced on my friends, practiced on my friends' children, anybody that would let me. But it never occurred to me that you could actually, I don't know, I kind of probably fear, lack of self-confidence, and you'll see my chart, so you'll perhaps understand it for those of you that practice astrology as well. It just never occurred to me that I could actually earn money doing my passion until 2012. I had kind of had an awakening, which was kind of funny, really. I was in the coaching world. I was a social media marketing coach, and I had a coach. And one day on a call, it had been kind of playing me for a little bit, because I had friends who were doing hand analysis and other tools like that in their business. I announced to my coach that I was going to drop the social media marketing coaching, which I did not love, and I was going to practice my astrology professionally. Well, it was so funny, because she was like, well, I have never heard you talk about astrology. And I took my laptop and I showed her my bookshelves full of full of astrology books. But anyway, after that point, I dived in. I was one of Kaypacha's first students in his Astrology 101 class, and I did 102 and 103. And then I also took 101 one-on-one classes with a fabulous lady called Maridel Bose, who I'd known for quite some time, who was actually one of Stephen Forrest's apprentices. So I'm kind of trained in both Jeffrey Wolf Green astrology and Forrest, though I kind of, add my own bit, as we all do. Why do I love astrology? Because to me, it answers everything. And why evolutionary astrology? Well, I like the psychological approach. I like the it makes sense to me, the premise that we are born to evolve and have evolutionary lessons throughout our life. So as you can see or hear, I'm British. I have lived in Utah in the United States for how long now? Oh. For 9 years. 9 years. We became citizens 4 years ago, I think. We actually lived in Adelaide, Australia for 19 months before that. We left the UK in January of 2007 and moved to Adelaide to live for life. We emigrated, and then my husband's job moved us to Utah. So I am a traveller. So I'm wondering if you're guessing what sign I am. I lived in Canada as in my early 20s as well. I was a nanny, and I lived in Connecticut for 4 years. So I've lived on 3 continents, in a few countries. I've lived in Northern Ireland too, as a teenager. And I am a lifelong learner. And that's another reason I love astrology. It keeps me engaged because there's just endless learning in astrology, so many rabbit holes and so many places to go and so much to learn. So my philosophy with astrology is that it's an intimate experience, that we should get to know the energies at a deep, deep level and really feel the astrology in our soul, that it's more than just a mental game. Of course, the mind comes into it too, and there's so much to learn. But really, I believe that we should feel all the energies. I also believe that we have choice all along the way. And that choice is often not just in our actions, but in how we react and respond and look at things. And that includes all the highs and the lows of the chart. I'm not a fan of negative astrology. Of course, bad things happen, but I'm not a fan of anything being called malefic or bad or anything like that, because everything has its yin and its yang. And I've just talked about the spiral evolution already. I think understanding astrological cycles is as important as understanding the seasons, because everything is cycles. So I've put my favorite quote down here as well. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I've attributed it to Wayne Dyer, which is where I first heard it. I believe it actually came from somebody else before that, but I couldn't find his name. So Dr. Wayne Dyer it is. So that is my philosophy. Those that follow my Facebook page, and I will have links at the end where you can follow me and connect with me at a deeper level, will know that I'm always talking about choosing how you look at things, rather than the planets doing you. I believe that we cannot do the energies, we can't control them, but we can react and respond differently. So Saturn, I've created this slide with, some Saturn words. I'm sure you all know them, but seeing as we're talking about Saturn, I thought I would come up with some things before I dive deeper into how I really look at Saturn. So he's the teacher, the father, expertise, the expert. He's bones, contraction, persistence, caution, determination. He's time. He's mastery, faithfulness, stability, concentration, analysis systems, building, tact, diplomacy, justice, thrift, economy, deliberation, conservatism, endurance, and discipline. He's also crystallization, obstruction, selfishness, slowness, fearfulness, limitation, materialism, melancholy, pessimism, avarice, secretiveness, suspicion, severity, and cynicism. Now you'll notice that I didn't actually split these words up into positive and negative. Because to my mind, take conservatism, for example. Conservatism can be both a positive and a less positive energy. Fearfulness can be very negative, but sometimes fear is useful. Limitation can be useful. Blocks can be useful. So I don't think anything has a one-dimensional explanation. And that kind of really explains how I feel about Saturn and all the energies in the chart. So I just thought I'd do a quick go through of the houses. These are very, very basic. So, and you may disagree, but they're kind of just a few ideas to trigger some thoughts about where Saturn might be in your chart. So, for example, the first house, defining for oneself and by oneself who you are. Second, security through ownership and having very strong values, core values. Third house, the expert voice and focused learning. Fourth house, secure home life, emotional boundaries, a moral code, but can be based on fear. Fifth house, restrained self-expression and joyfulness, but also greater depth. I think of the artist in the fifth house who maybe only creates a couple of really important works that are really, really deep, rather than mass production of free-flowing energy. And also less flamboyant in the fifth. Sixth house, over-dependence on rigid routines, but disciplined in health and exercise, can be an expert in these areas. Seventh house, very grounded in relationships, or the grounding one, the steady one. Shyness and security. Eighth house, fear of deep investigation, greater security through deeply bonded relationships. Ninth house is often slow expansion and very concretized religious spiritual experience. 10th house, success in public life, the expert, the father figure. 11th, security in groups, rigid or conservative views. 12th house, trying to bring order in chaos, isolation, trying to control the uncontrollable. And I have a very funny story to tell you about that. So I thought I'd share my chart as an example of a strong Saturn and a couple of examples of Saturn transits. And then I want to talk about deep acceptance and what peace, deep acceptance of Saturn in your chart can bring and why it can bring that. So there I have Saturn in Capricorn, in the sign he rules, conjunct my Capricorn ascendant. So Saturn is my ruling sign. Saturn is right there in the face. I've spent a lot of my life struggling with Saturn because, as you can see, I am very, very Sagittarius too, with a Gemini moon. Very kind of changeable, very mutable, very free, very free thinker. And then I have Saturn. Yeah. So I have spent my life growing into Saturn, growing into my rising sign, which we do anyway, but even more for me. So learning Saturn, learning to love Saturn and growing into him and maturing into Saturn has been so important in my life. So I want to tell, I'm heading into my second Saturn return. It's next year, fast approaching. So I wanted to look back at my first Saturn return to just talk about the lead up. And I'm going to be very, very vulnerable here and tell you about some of my past. And that's okay because it's public knowledge now. But as Saturn, so here I am as Saturn approached in December 1985, was approaching my my ascendant. Okay. Okay, so he's actually, I thought I put the wrong one here, but in 1986, he went over and I had my first, or he was approaching, and it was actually 1989. Oh, that's where I was, yeah, where my Saturn return was. So you can see Saturn on the right-hand chart approaching my natal Saturn. And I put this one first because I actually, having Saturn transiting across all of those Sagittarius planets, and I want to tell you the difference between the two Saturn extended periods and two Saturn returns as they approach. So at the end of 1985, which is why I chose then, I actually moved to Canada. I left the UK to find myself. Which is kind of funny because that's travel, becoming kind of learning about myself because he was going to go over my son. And I actually spiraled. Well, I had a fabulous time actually. And I did learn a lot about myself. I found myself as Saturn traveled over all my Sagittarius planets, going through the 11th and 12th houses. I found new groups of people that I really connected with, which is very 11th house. But as Saturn went into my 12th house, I actually found, I moved to Connecticut and I found the 80s, the area, the time of cocaine and parties and crazy parties, mass consumption of these things. And luckily for me, I seem not to have a too, what shall we say, addictive nature. I partied madly. I got a bit lost in it, but I had Saturn controlling how deep into it I got. I also had some major kind of shamanic experiences as Saturn traveled through my 12th house back then, heading up to the first Saturn return. So 88, early 1989, I was having amazing shamanic experiences. I got invited to what I call real sweat lodges. That was after I'd stopped the cocaine and stuff. Before that, I also got involved in a lot of mushrooms and had some amazing spiritual experiences through mushrooms, all the time with Saturn kind of keeping a lid on it. I like to think I'm very grateful. Sorry, I'm very grateful to Saturn for that time because, sorry, I'll go back, because he kept me safe, I think. So this is a good way to look at Saturn. The first Saturn return itself was huge. I abruptly stopped all the partying. I left it. I had some of those shamanic experiences in the sweat lodges. And then I moved back to England, grew up, very Saturnian word, and went to school and got my degree. Then I got married, then I had children. It's kind of this like switch was flipped on my first Saturn return. So I'm interested to see what the second one's going to bring. Now I know better and I do better. This second time around, I have spent the last couple of years, actually, in this extended Saturn return period, taking formal shamanic training. And that's why I do shamanic practices within my astrology work now, especially in groups that I work with. I do classes. I did a Venus retrograde class where I used a lot of shamanic journey work and also dismemberment journeys, where people could use the astrological energies to find themselves. And so that's how I like to work. So this second Saturn return is approaching fast. But I do want to tell you a really funny story, okay, before I move on. If you'll look at this chart, you'll see, for some reason, my mouse is being a little bit kooky. Of course, because I'm on a presentation. You'll see that Saturn is at 21 degrees and 57 minutes retrograde, and my Sun is at 21 degrees and 37 minutes. Oh, sorry, that's 57 there. Yeah. That was when Saturn retrograded back to the 21st degree of Sagittarius, where my Sun is, on July the 24th. And Saturn has been on that degree since then until last week, when he moved to 22 degrees of Sagittarius after turning direct on August the 25th. And I realized yesterday what I've been doing back in May. So as Saturn was heading towards the degree of my Sun in a retrograde, I went into a bit of a panic about the fact I wasn't earning enough money doing my astrology. And I went and took a job for a while, a part-time job. It's almost like I was driven to doing it. And it was in retail, and I did retail when I was younger. And I ended up in this store mastering a lot of stuff, which is a very good Saturn word too. It was in a natural health food store, so I learned so much about herbs and natural medicines and the like, which was fabulous. But this store was so small that I was on my own in the store most of the time. I would be there in these four walls, unable to leave for a break. So I suddenly realized I had imprisoned myself, 12th house. It was self-undoing because I didn't have time to pursue my business as I wanted to and to do other things. I wasn't out and about like Sagittarius likes to be, and when they're working, having different things going on all the time. I was stuck in these four walls. So I actually finished that job last week as Saturn left the degree of my Sun. So this is, even with all the knowledge in the world, we can sometimes still give in to these energies of these planets, which kind of amuses me, really. It kind of made me laugh that I did it. But there's the good side of Saturn. I learned from it, and I gained from it, and I learned what I don't want to be doing. Okay. And I've learned that I need to work for myself, be my own expert, and own my expertise. And then there along came Linda and asked me to present this, and I'm launching my first Astrology 101, if you like, level 1 class pretty soon. All kinds of good things coming out of the woodworks once I learned my lesson. And I suspect that the second Saturn return is going to bring a lot more shifts in my business. So more on Saturn. Saturn rules the first chakra, which is the base of the spine, the root, which is about establishing healthy routines to help you root, and stability, being barefoot on the grass and hiking in the mountains, being around rocks and stones to ground. They're all good ways to connect with that base of the spine, the first chakra. Saturn also rules the crown, which is about the resolution of karma and the move into higher consciousness. Saturn's known as the Lord of Karma, the taskmaster teacher, not just the teacher. He's like, you must do this now. He's the furthest visible planet, the dweller on the threshold and about limits, the limit of what we knew was our universe before. He's the small, still voice within. Listen to it and we are fine. Don't, and he teaches us, just like in my job. Saturn brings order and structure in chaos. His metals are lead, pewter, and zinc, or stones, whichever. He's cold. He's the north. His day is Saturday. He rules the number 8 in numerology, and he's the strength card in the tarot. I mean, you can find lots of things to contradict these things, but this is my belief. These are the ones he works for me. In Greek mythology, Cronus, or Saturn, Cronus was Father Time, was the son of Uranus and Gaia. He led his brothers and sisters, the Titans, in a revolt against their father and became the king of the gods, and he married the Titan Rhea. They had a total of 6 children. You can see them on here. Pluto, Demeter, which is also Ceres. You can see the whole incestuous lot. You can see Jupiter comes up a few times. But Cronus had a bad habit of eating his newborn children to prevent them from one day overthrowing him as king of the gods. Finally, at the birth of her last child, Zeus, who is Jupiter, Rhea tricked him into swallowing a rock instead, a rock. Zeus then beat his father with the help of his brothers and sisters, and the Romans adopted Cronus as the god Saturn. Now then, here's some stuff I've written about Saturn that may become a part of what may be my book one day. So how does Saturn and knowledge of Saturn help you to bring deep acceptance in your life and deep acceptance of your path, your evolutionary path? Well, Saturn is the bones of all. Saturn is contraction, persistence, stability, determination, endurance, discipline, and boundaries. Saturn is the skeleton of life, the structure of your inner life and your outer. Strong bones are supportive. Now, Saturn isn't sexy to most people, but without him, there would be chaos and life would crumble to dust. Saturn's also obstruction, blocks, limitation, melancholy, pessimism, and avarice. Where do you think the term Saturnian comes from? It's an expression to describe people with a very dour kind of outlook and face. Okay. But as with all inequalities, the positive can be negative and the negative can be positive. So as I said, Saturn is the skeleton of your life. A deep understanding of Saturn in your heart and soul helps you to understand where you need boundaries and where you have walls. Saturn shows you where you are serious and where you get to lighten up at times. Saturnalia, the festival, the Roman festival of Saturnalia, which actually became Christmas in the end, was actually a feast of, drunkenness and merriness and gift-giving and fun and a real reprieve. And so that shows the light side of Saturn, that Saturn does know how to have fun. So Saturn brings deep acceptance of where you are blocked in life and where you can overcome those blocks. Saturn shows you where fear unconsciously shapes and limits your life and self-expression, and he shows you where your greatest work is. Saturn shows you your strength and your greatest weakness. Saturn is Father Time. He wields a scythe like the Grim Reaper. But Saturn, however, is wisdom through aging and is about civics and morality. He's the elder, the Cronus, Father Time. But most of all, Saturn is about mastery. Mastery of the self, mastery of your work, mastery of your physical being. Deep acceptance of Saturn helps you to love the wisdom he brings rather than seeing him as holding you back. And with 4 major planets in Sagittarius, Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter, I should know that Saturn has tempered some of my worst excesses, as I said before. Deep acceptance of Saturn within you allows you to embrace the strength, discipline, and wisdom he brings, whilst learning how to work through the fearfulness he also brings by recognizing those fears and what sense of restriction they bring, but also where they are useful. Fear can be useful. It can stop you from doing crazy things that might be damaging. A deep acceptance of Saturn helps you to understand and work with the rules and restrictions that you both require and want to be able to loosen. Accept the structures your soul needs. Like, for example, I need a home base. I need to have some solidity in my life. I need to be mastering something all the time. I accept that Saturn saves my life from Sag excesses and keeps me grounded, as I said. Okay. So I don't know if we're going to have time for a Q&A at the end, because I am going to take you into a shamanic journey. If you've never journeyed before, just go with it. It's easy to do, okay? And I've just lost my slide, so I'll just wait a minute for that. Saturn, I'll go back to it. There we go. Saturn is up in the upper world, of course, because Saturn is a planet. So when you're journeying, when you hear the drums starting, I want you to imagine yourself just in whatever place comes to mind. Trust what you get. Mine is kind of a meadow. Some people find themselves on a beach. Some people find themselves in the mountains. And then ask for a guide to show and to take you to the upper world. Now, your path to the upper world could be a beanstalk, it could be a ladder, it could be steps. Mine happens to be an eagle. I fly up on the back of an eagle and ask to be taken to Saturn. And when you're on Saturn, I just want you to wander around, to get to know him, and to most of all, to ask Saturn what he wants you to know. Okay. Ask, what Saturn mastery lessons you may need. Ask where he's useful in your life, where those blocks and restrictions are saving you from things you might regret. Just have a conversation with Saturn. Sorry. I don't know what that was. Just personify Saturn. So I'm going to get the music going. And I want you to sit with your eyes closed, follow the music, okay? Sorry, there's some other music started somewhere. I am just going to stop it. So sorry. Here we go. Funny enough, I do this all the time with my groups. So this is kind of funny, but I'm going to get it going. I will get it. Oh. Oh, I'm getting embarrassed. Bear with me 1 second. Let my computer catch up. And go to present again. Luckily, this should just finish at the time. So I'm sorry we don't have, we may not have time for Q&A, but you can find me anywhere and ask me questions if you've got them. Here we go. Ask you to finish your conversation and call you back to Earth. Okay, sorry for the abrupt ending, but so how was that? So I'm going to end by showing you a slide that with how to connect with me, if I can get it to move on. Having such joy, technical problems. I do this every week, and but hey, I don't know about you, it's felt like Mercury's been a little bit retrograde-ish this week. So I'm going to escape out of the main presentation. I am going to go physically. There we go. There's the next one. Oh, and we'll go back to it again. This is how you can connect with me. My website, louiseedington.com. My Facebook business page is Louise Edington with a blue check mark. And it's facebook.com/Wild Woman Unleashed. Instagram on Louise Edington also. So I'd love to hear how the journey went for you. I'd love to answer any questions. We don't have much time. We've only got 5 minutes. So have at it. Hope you enjoyed that.
Louise, thank you so much. That was very interesting. Would you please click on stop share at the top of the screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to get my mouse to go up to it.
Okay.
So I will get there. Oh, there we go. There we go. Stop share.
Okay, great. Yes, well, that was a great
Sorry
journey.
about the technical.
Oh, that's okay. I'll just share that, yeah, I went to Saturn and asked, what message do you have for me? And it reminded me of who I really am, which I already know who I am. But it was like a younger version that was a bit softer. But she was also very strong, and she's like a father figure, and she would never reject anybody. She'd be so strong for people, and her type of love is very committed, and she would never let anybody down. So I really love that journey. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I think Dawn had her hand up, did you?
I loved it, Louise. Thank you so much. It really did take me places.
Awesome.
Into my 4th house in Aquarius. Yep. Totally dedicated.
Awesome.
Thank you.
My aim is to get everybody journeying to the planet.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I love your painting.
Which one? This?
The red one, did you draw that?
No, I didn't draw it. No.
That was beautiful, though. And that was a very good journey to Saturn, obstacles and lessons to be learned for me. But it was fun, and I liked that I was high on a mountain, even though I was grounded because I was on the mountain.
Mm.
So, yeah, I told him I'd come back tomorrow, so.
Cool. Maybe when the music plays without interruptions.
That was very supportive. Thank you.
Hi, Louise. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that I really related to a lot of what you shared, even your own journey and shamanic journeying and Saturn. Huge. My Saturn return, I got really deep into astrology and just a lot of correlations, even the drugs and all of that. But I'm going to go back and listen to this and do the journeying, because I used to do a lot of journeying.
Cool.
And I have a drum and a rattle, and I do all that. So
I should have just drummed myself. Right.
And I've had some very amazing communications with Saturn. So I hope to go deeper. I wasn't able to go there tonight, but I hope to listen to it and do the same thing.
Awesome. Well, let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Louise, thank you very much, and thank you from all of us, and hope to see you next time. Would you all please thank Louise Edington?
Thank you, Louise.
Thank
Beautiful.
you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
That was amazing.
Thank you. See you soon.